Ever felt like your mind is running a marathon of worries without reaching a single conclusion? We've all been there. The slow descent into that black hole where you know exactly where you're going, but it feels like there's nothing you can do but ride it out. Hello, listeners. Welcome to The Path to Calm. Stop overthinking, become present, find peace. Today is April 14th, 2026, and on this episode, we're tackling the struggle of shifting from paralyzing rumination to productive problem solving. We're featuring the book from Trenton, The Overthinking Cure: How to Stay in the Present, Shake Negativity, and Stop Your Stress and Anxiety. In this episode, we're exploring how to reframe those anxious thoughts into tools for growth using CBT and Mindfulness. You'll learn why mastering your thoughts in the morning is the key to dominating your day, and why consistent action, even if it's kind of messy, beats perfect planning every single time. Let's get into it. Here's the section from The Overthinking Cure. In the next chapter, we're going to look more closely at the content of anxious thoughts and how we can tease apart these thoughts and rewrite them so they work better for us. For now, however, let's simply become aware of the phenomenon of overthinking in itself, i.e., rumination. Rumination and worry go hand in hand. In fact, you can think of rumination as an anxiety-creating engine. Ordinarily, your brain is a marvelous tool that helps you solve problems, create new things, and identify goals to work toward. Thinking is wonderful. It's what allowed your ancestors to learn, to avoid danger, and to correctly appraise their environment. However, the same mental process can become a nightmare if it spirals out of control. The mind, as they say, is a good servant, but a terrible master. How do you identify rumination? Picking over details again and again, working ourselves into a froth, obsessing over possibilities, getting down on ourselves, trying to stop thinking, but being unable to, or rehearsing imaginary scenarios or discussions. All of this is part of ruminating. Our brain thinks it's helping, but it's just chewing things over and over until you're a stressed out mess. What's the difference between ordinary thinking and ruminating? Well, that's easy. Normal thinking helps us solve problems and learn. Rumination is useless. All it does is make us feel bad. The truth is that we all ruminate at times. We all get caught up in irresistible thoughts. But we can choose how to respond to those thoughts. Let's stay in a proactive, open, and curious mindset and look at why we might ruminate. Usually, it's one of two things we're trying to do: prepare for the future, learn from the past. Research shows that we actually do feel temporarily less stressed when we're worrying and ruminating over something. Worry then can give us the illusion of control. We imagine that the more we worry, the better prepared we are for a future scenario, or the more thoroughly we have processed a past one. But the relief is an illusion and short-lived. That's because it doesn't really serve any purpose. A big sign that you're ruminating rather than just thinking is that you're going around in circles. Normal thinking has a start and an end, whereas rumination seems to cover the same ground over and over. It doesn't ultimately help, and it doesn't yield any fresh insights, i.e., you don't learn anything new. One telltale sign of rumination is its emotional charge. Focusing on the worst-case scenario and all the gruesome details, you're probably ruminating. True, the worst thing might happen, but if you catch yourself focusing on exclusively the worst things that can happen and ignoring any potentially good or neutral outcomes, you're likely ruminating. Why you shouldn't challenge your thoughts. A common technique, for example in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is to challenge thoughts that arise and try to replace them with more accurate ones. The trouble is, though this intellectually sounds right, it so seldom works. Remember experiential avoidance? When you argue with yourself, you are essentially disagreeing with your current reality and adopting a judgmental, intolerant attitude to what is. You cannot help what automatically and spontaneously emerges in your mind. So, what helps will it do to argue or fight against it with more ideas about what you should think instead? In fact, this process can more often spell the beginning of an anxiety and rumination spiral rather than an end to one. Yes, our thoughts are information and symbols and stories only. They're not necessarily truth. But if we can adopt a mindset of curious and compassionate investigation, we can be aware of all this without going into judging, forcefully pushing ourselves to think something else. At the very least, sometimes it's not possible to argue with yourself over what the right thought is. You often don't know. If you're dealing with unknowns, it's not helpful to try and talk yourself into the thought you think you should be having. Rather, try to practice discernment. There's no need to challenge or argue with yourself. It's not a war. Instead, be soft, gentle, and curious, and ask yourself, is this thought helping me in any way? By helpful, we want to know if it's going to lead us where we want to go. Note that we're not asking whether a thought is true or good. It's not a moral judgment. This is because a thought can be true, but still very, very unhelpful. Dwelling on it may be a bad idea, even if it is 100% accurate. So many of us get caught up in overthinking because we're making judgments about good and bad, and maybe even beating ourselves up in the process, but this is not a useful metric. But it's easier to shift to a question of helpful and unhelpful. This brings things down to earth and puts them in context of your life and what you're trying to achieve. Just like we did when we considered ACT, we use action as a yardstick. A thought can be said to be helpful if, in having it, we're more inspired to act according to our values. If a thought encourages us, makes us more resilient, gives us ideas for future plans, helps us cope, or teaches us something, it's helpful. We basically want to take a thought, hold it up to the light, and ask, what does this actually create for me? Some examples will make the point clear. Here's a thought. My relationship is making me unhappy. If you think this thought, what are the results? You'll be unhappy, and your attention and focus will be drawn to this unhappiness, and that's about it. The thought is true, but thinking it doesn't really go anywhere. If you're guided by this thought, the most likely scenario is that you'll just sit with those feelings of unhappiness. You'll feel frustrated and passive. You could also think, everything's fine, there's nothing to worry about. And in this case, the thought will be untrue and unhelpful. Guided by this thought, you put your head in the sand and stay in a relationship that isn't working. Finally, you could think, I don't seem to want to be in this relationship anymore, but I haven't made any choice yet. I seem to be afraid of making the decision. This thought is different. It acknowledges the unhappiness, but makes room to solve the problem and take action. This one's a lot more useful than the other two, because if you're guided by this one, you're more likely to take action and come to a resolution. Rumination-style thoughts seem helpful, but on closer examination are not. They don't give you any practical information or suggest a path forward or hint at a solution. If you can start looking at your thoughts in terms of their actionable value, you'll be able to gain perspective, be more proactive, and use thinking as a tool rather than a pointless exercise in stressing yourself out. Well, what if you can't think of any solutions? This is tricky, but the answer is obvious. If thinking doesn't and can't help your problem, then don't think about it. You might be too upset or emotional to see a solution at that moment, or you might need to be patient and wait for the situation to evolve a little. Either way, rumination won't help and may in fact muddy the waters further. In this case, find a healthy distraction. Come back to the problem later and look at it fresh. This is not the same as avoidance. You're consciously acknowledging that a problem needs solving, but you're also recognizing that you're not in a state of mind to find the solution just yet. Returning to ACT from the previous section, you might notice yourself being completely overwhelmed and upset and choose to say to yourself, I'm not getting anywhere here. I'm going to stop, take a breather, and go for a long run until my head clears. This can be enough to calm you down and get you into a frame of mind where rumination won't take over. Your brain is like a powerful problem-solving machine. Thinking is what it does. But ultimately, it's you, your conscious awareness and intention, who is in charge. If you're obsessed with worrying about a problem that cannot be solved, then it's up to you to turn the brain machine off or redirect it. Without anything to stop it, your brain will furiously try to solve an unsolvable problem. But you can always connect with that bigger part of yourself, with your observing self, and choose to drop rumination that isn't helping you. Here, acceptance comes into play. This may mean consciously choosing to acknowledge and even embrace a situation that isn't great, but can't be changed. We have to be in charge of our brains and say, "Thanks, brain, but your problem solving is no longer needed." Remember that there's no need to challenge your thoughts or do battle with them. You don't need to try and stop those thoughts. Instead, know that as a human being, all kinds of thoughts will pop up in your mind, helpful and unhelpful, true and untrue. But all they are is thoughts. You can always be aware of them, notice what's happening, and choose for yourself what to do with them once they've popped up. A helpful thought can guide you, inspire you, help you see a solution, or bring you a learning insight. An unhelpful one keeps you stuck, going in a loop. It constricts your awareness and keeps you in a strange tunnel of your own creation. Inside that tunnel, we miss out on important information. To be calm, collected, and in control, then, doesn't mean we have pristine, clean minds with only good thoughts coming up. Instead, we have all the same thoughts and ideas as normal, but we're now outside this cycle, able to watch it from afar and consciously choosing whether any of these thoughts work for us and our values. What freedom to know that having a thought doesn't mean anything. It's just a thought. The way off the carousel of rumination and overthinking is simply to get into that observing self and realize that we can decide what's important. We can sift through those thoughts and pick out what's useful and drop what's not useful. We can choose how to act or whether to act at all. Our conscious awareness and action are where our power lies. Our thoughts are not able to control or trap us. Thanks to everyone who joined us on today's episode. We've covered some powerful tools for dealing with anxious rumination. Remember, the goal isn't to challenge every thought, but to ask if it's helping you reach your goals and live according to your values. As we wrap this episode, I'd like to leave you with this quote from Maya Angelou. You may not control all the circumstances that come your way, but you do have power over your response to those circumstances.